Here I am at home. We're out of hours because we're talking to you and there's a bit of a time difference.
Mhm.
So, Juan, would you like to introduce yourself and let us know whereabouts in the world you are? Because that's quite interesting in itself for somebody just sat here in the UK, in Manchester, in the rain,
Oh,
dreaming of holiday vacation locations. So,
well, yeah.
shoot.
Yeah, I'm Juan Fernandez. I'm mostly known for my work in the comic book industry. And I am from Puerto Rico, which a lot of people don't really understand what Puerto Rico is. It's a United States Commonwealth, which means we're a United States territory, but yeah, there's a place where a lot of people come to vacation. It's always summer down here, so it's always hot. Which can be a problem with props, by the way, when it's a little too hot. Certain materials don't tolerate that very well. But yeah, that's basically an introduction to me.
Okay, so I obviously know you through the replica prop community,
Right.
but then on top of that, there's another layer that we can get into talking about, which is the comic book stuff.
Yeah.
So where do you want to start? The comic books or the props?
Completely up to you.
Or do we just start with Star Wars? Because I'm presuming that is a thing that brings
Uh,
all of this together.
that's the catalyst for sure, definitely. Um, Even before comic books were a thing in my life, it was always about Star Wars. That's like the one thing that caught my attention as a little kid. Um, I was born in '85, so I wasn't there for the original release of the original trilogy, but growing up, it was on TV constantly here. So I just remember seeing, the doors opening and the stormtroopers blasting in and Darth Vader coming through the door. And those images like were like my first memories of Star Wars from A New Hope. And seeing Darth Vader like coming through the door after they just blasted through, that's what like enamored me with those characters. Just seeing the helmets, the armors, and all the action. That's where it all started for me. And yeah, like
Yeah, because I mean, for me in particular, and I'm guessing for you, we'd never really seen anything like this before. And
never.
the first time you see something like that, I think it really imprints on you,
Right.
and here we are today, still
Exactly. Yeah.
still talking
Um,
about it, still enjoying it,
yeah.
still fanatical about it.
I have an older brother, and I was exposed to a lot of really cool stuff because of that. Obviously, he was born in '79, so I was heavily influenced by all these like pop culture, pop culture phenomena of the '80s. Like cartoons and movies. Um, but Star Wars I discovered on my own. And yeah, it really shaped who I was as I was, developing. And it sparked my interest for arts for sure. That was like what really got me interested in everything arts, like not just comic books, but seeing the movies. Like it made, as a little kid, I wanted to know how movies were made. I wanted to know how these images were being
Well,
produced.
see, that was the thing, especially for us being a little bit older, shall we say. We saw the movies in the theater, and then there was no video, and even a little bit later when there was video, it was like not
Right.
everybody had it, and that's kind of a bit weird. People probably don't really appreciate that. I mean, I think I was looking into when color TV started in the UK, and I think it was only about 50 years ago, which is just crazy. Really. They started actually broadcasting it, or at least that's when people started being able to afford it,
Yeah, yeah.
because things were a lot different there in technology. But yeah, we couldn't watch the movies whenever we wanted to, but what we could watch was the making of.
Yeah.
So I spent a lot of time watching the making of, certainly Empire Strikes Back and
All right.
Return of the Jedi. So yeah, that definitely brought me into into the other side of movie making, the behind the scenes and the magic that was involved.
Same for me. Like when the VHS, when I got the VHS, especially the special edition VHS, they had like you pop in the movie, and before all the movies would start, they had a section about like the making of that particular one, or like just snippets of like what they did to
Oh yeah, for the special
yeah,
edition.
to
Yeah.
enhance it for the special edition. And oh my God, I must have burnt through those VHS because I watched that was like my favorite part. I would rewatch that over and over and over again. And back in the day, we didn't have internet, and I mean, it was just starting to become like a household uh thing to have internet. And back then, it was a dial-up. I remember you just to see an image pop up, it would like you'd see it come down little by little. So I was always looking for information on props, movie making, anything I could get my hands on. But yeah, it was the same for me here.
Beyond Star Wars, then you had an interest in the props
Oh
uh,
yeah,
from quite an early age. Then
oh yeah, yeah. I was always building my own interpretation of the props. I remember the first thing that I was exposed to as far as props goes was all the Don Post helmets,
Mhm.
the regular ones, because when I started paying attention, the deluxe weren't even out yet. So there was no such thing as like a fiberglass Darth Vader or anything like that. And I remember buying those regular helmets and like building armor parts from scratch, just from whatever materials I could like find in the house as a little kid. And as I got older, the Dompost Deluxe helmets became available, and I remember getting my first Darth Vader Deluxe and like, begging my mother to let me buy a mannequin, and she thought it was like the weirdest thing that her son wanted a mannequin to put in his room, and then getting my grandmother to sew the cape for me, and yeah, that was like my first experience with like putting together like a full suit was with Darth Vader once I got that fiberglass helmet from Don Post. Um, I remember those were the days of also Galaxy Trading. I don't know if you remember that. I remember getting an armor from Galaxy Trading, and then everything else I just built from scratch. I remember going to Radio Shack to buy boxes to make the belt boxes and all that stuff. So yeah, I was always so drawn to how these things were made, and there was literally no information. So I was just figuring everything out on my own and just trying to, get as close as I could with things I could buy off the shelf. Um, and then of course, as things progress, the internet brought up all this information and access to uh lineage pieces, and yeah, and then things got out of control.
so you built a Vader from Radio Shack and Dom Post, and then you were done with it. You got Vader out your system, and you moved on to other characters, right?
Oh, you never get it out of your system. Jesus. Like it's still like an ongoing thing. But I mean,
So what
for me,
you've got like
Vader was always my obsession. Like I loved it was always Vader, Stormtroopers, and Boba Fett, but Vader was definitely my obsession, and I think that's probably what people in the props community like recognize me for the most, for the Vader stuff that I've done and like for my Vader collection. But yeah, it was always
you've
Vader.
got a couple of Vader helmets then now.
A couple, you could say that.
So at last count, how many do you even count them?
I know I stopped counting. I mean,
At what?
it took
At
over.
three, four.
No, there's got to be at least um close to close to 30 helmets, close to 30 helmets. And there's
All different
yeah,
variations of Vader.
yeah, either, related to 80s tour helmets, modern tour helmets, stunts, heroes, A New Hope, ESB, Return of the Jedi, you name it. And, there's also been access to so many production made castings and like, uh, we've been very fortunate that owners of these original production made castings like have given us access to, recast of them. So yeah, there's just too many to count right now in here.
You've obviously, how long you been into the props then, would you say? I mean,
I mean,
you started off
if
before the classic action.
if we're going like all the way back to the beginning, it must have been 96 or 97 when I started to like get into like seriously replicating the props. It must have been 96, 97, when Don Post released their like higher end replicas. Because, before then, to me, it wasn't even like I didn't consider them props. Before then, it was just, helmets, costumes. And then when you see it in the magazines that they're going to release a helmet that has lineage to the actual screen used prop, that's when things got real. And I'm sure it was like that for a lot of people, watching this, and a lot of the guys that we interact with in the forums. That was the catalyst for a lot of us, because before then it wouldn't even cross your mind that you would ever have access to anything, related to the production. And when you read the ads on the magazine that the Don Post Deluxe series is cast from screen use props, like that's what really set it all off for me. And then it just became like this how do I say it? It was like an obsession to get as close as possible. And then you guys come around with your stormtrooper. That was one that was, uh, at least for me, I was never satisfied with anything out there. I did buy the Don Post Stormtrooper, like the classic action and the deluxe, but they were so far removed, and I was never satisfied. So when you guys came around, that was a very, very welcome surprise.
I think that was Return of the Jedi as well, wasn't it? That Dumb Post one, based.
um, yeah, they're based off of if you want to track it all the way back to like the original props, it must have been Return of the Jedi, but I think it was derived from a special edition casting, but they didn't even actually use that casting that they got as a reference. Like if you look at the final product, it doesn't look anything like what they got. I mean, to the average person, it's gonna look exactly the same, but to us who are detail oriented, you can tell that they didn't cast it directly from that reference that they were given.
So that I think from I don't know how this sits with the newer guys who have found the replica prop community more recently, but for us back in the day, we wanted accuracy. There
Oh
was
yeah,
there was no accuracy, and we
none.
craved it, and that is why I'm interested in the
Yeah.
accuracy as opposed to something that looks like the thing, you know.
Yes.
And I think a lot of that is because we couldn't get it. Wasn't
Yeah.
available. It was totally off limits. This is what you were offered and take it or leave it kind of thing.
Hmm. Hmm.
Or make something yourself, you know, like the big Frankenstein FX kind of stuff
Yeah.
that were the thing. Um, but I think a couple of things came together then at that point, didn't they? With it almost Star Wars almost got a rebirth with the special editions coming out, and
Right.
then with the internet and the communities and the chat rooms and all of that kind of stuff, all people coming together thinking, hey, oh, we could actually do this and we could actually talk about it, you know, and someone else says, oh yeah, I know this and I know that, and then the community just grows out of that from that
Mhm.
moment in time, really.
No, yeah. Plus, there's it just I think when you're younger and there wasn't all this information floating around, like it didn't cross your mind that some of these props actually got out you
Mm.
know, that there was people who were actually taking stuff home, and that after the movie wraps, some of the stuff got thrown away,
Yeah.
and people would just dumpster dive and get some of the stuff as, you know, as they didn't even think it was going to be worth anything. They just took it home as like souvenirs. And, you know, few decades passed by, and now those things that were taken from the set or from a dumpster, they become invaluable, like something, you know, that holds so much information, and like everyone's, you know, looking for all these hidden gems, uh, and trying to share as much information as possible, and trying to share, you know, these castings like you guys have been doing with all your stuff. Like everything you guys put out has some sort of link, some sort of lineage to original production material, which is amazing. um I don't think we could have ever thought that was going to be ever possible.
No, no, it wasn't, was it? I mean, before there was stuff there. There was always kind of stuff there, but you needed to know the right people, and it was quite a quite a closed um community in a lot of ways. And it was
Right.
almost like a two-tier community with the
Hmm.
haves and the have nots. And I always kind of wasn't too keen on that because
Yeah.
I was definitely one of the have-nots,
Yeah.
and Simon's discovery kind of changed that. But I didn't want to change it for me. I wanted to change it for and Simon obviously wanted to as well. Wanted to change it for everybody, so we wanted to bring it out there and make it available.
And that actually, in my situation, like you gotta think about it from my perspective. I live in like this tropical island where, you know,
We just rub it in.
there's there no, but no, what I mean, what I mean is that like there's no connection at all here for someone like me. Like I didn't have any connections in Hollywood. I don't have any easy access to any of this stuff. So if it wasn't for the internet, I would have never been able to, you know, learn any of this stuff or acquire any of the pieces that I have. Um, so once the internet opened up those doors, it was easier, but not in, I say easier, but it was still like a lot of work and a lot of how do I say this? Gaining people's trust, you know, and you
Yeah,
know,
trying to make things happen.
yeah, it wasn't easy. Even though the internet opened up a lot of doors, it was not easy for me to like get through to the other side and like get access to a lot of the stuff that we have access to nowadays. Um, you know, and you always hear the stories of how some of these pieces were found and how some of these pieces were obtained, and like living in Puerto Rico, that just made it impossible for me if it wasn't for the internet. And like even with the internet, it's like I still have to reach out and like gain people's trust, show them that, you know, I have a genuine interest, and that you know, that this is a passion of mine. That I'm not just someone looking to profit, or, you know, or
Mm.
to flip things for a profit or anything like that. But yeah, it was hard work, but I mean, that's why we do it. We love it. It's a passion.
It is. It's not the easiest thing. I know you've
No.
been dipping your toe in the kind of production made and screen used and the
Yeah.
legit stuff. Are we able to talk about any of that, or is it
Yeah.
is a lot of it secretive still at the moment, or
Uh, I mean, I don't have a problem talking about any of it. But I know that there's a lot of people that like to keep their deals private. There are things that I've been asked not to divulge, so I
Mhm.
probably won't mention some stuff. But yeah, like the whole interest in production made and screen used pieces, that's just like a natural progression, you know, from that obsession of wanting to get closer to the actual pieces. You just get to the point where no matter how many lineage castings you have, no matter how many replicas and how accurate your replicas can get. Like when you have the opportunity to buy stuff that was actually on set or, in the production process, yeah, you definitely go in that direction. And I've been fortunate enough to get my hands on a few cool pieces. But yeah, it's just a natural progression. I'm sure you guys have gone through it as well.
It's exciting, and um, what how do you find them? Because the reality doesn't necessarily meet the expectations of how you think the prop is going to be when you finally get your hands on it.
I mean, I think if you're in the replica groups long enough, you start to realize that far ahead of time. You know, and the Stormtrooper is actually one that is a great example of that. Um, Everyone imagines a Stormtrooper super shiny, super like slick, very glossy armor, and then when you start getting those lineage castings like the RS Stormtrooper and you start seeing all the bumps and all the warts and all of the defects and you start seeing the pictures of original props and these things were made in a rush sometimes and they had tight budgets and limited and especially back then like technologies for mold making and prop making were just not as good as they are today. So yeah, everyone had like this idea of what things should look like. And then yeah, when you start buying production pieces and you see how rough they can be pretty rough, but that's where the magic is. That's where the charm of it is. Like it tells a story. And I love seeing all those details that, show you how things were made, how like what they went through to get those images on screen. And how they were able to not necessarily fool us, but like to get our imaginations going and envision things in a way. And then when
Take
you see it up close,
it take you to that
yeah,
place, don't they? Far, far away.
yep, exactly. But I mean, um, in my case with all the production and screen stuff, it's a lot of my stuff has been through dealers. But once you start getting pieces and you start sharing those pieces with the groups and people start, you start earning people's trust, then you get access to
Hmm.
other things that are not necessarily going to be posted for sale at a dealer or at an auction. Um, and Yeah, it's all just a process. Yeah, I'm sure RS goes through it as well with all the gaining trust to have access to all these parts to offer to all the other fans. Um, but yeah, I've been I don't want to say I've been lucky because it's all been hard work. It's all been like, having good social skills, you know, because it's all about sadly, it's all about who you know in this industry and in this hobby.
Hmm.
Um, which is something that I think a lot of the newcomers like don't realize, like because things come about so easily nowadays. You get a lot of new guys in the hobby that expect everything to be, completely how do you say it, like available or offered.
Hmm.
Um some guys don't realize like the value of certain things, so they think some things are too overpriced. They want things a little cheaper. So that's definitely a contrast between like the newcomers and like people that have been in the game for a little longer.
Yeah, yeah. I think in a lot of ways it's changed for the better,
Oh yeah.
but yeah, it's still there's there's still a bit of an etiquette involved in being a member of this community. I would say.
Unfortunately, like I wish it wasn't that way, but uh and I'm involved in a few other hobbies, and it seems to me like it's that way everywhere you go. Everywhere you go, every hobby that you get into, there's always going to be that group of people that want to like keep everything boxed in and away from everybody else, and they want to, what do you call it, gatekeeping, right? There's always gatekeeping, and all different hobbies have their gatekeepers. I wish it wasn't like that, and that's one of the things that I really do love about what you guys have done is that you've actually given access to everyone, you know, because you guys don't have like a code to get in, and like a lot of the stuff you guys have offered is an abs would have been an absolute wet dream back in the 90s, you know, stuff that no one would have ever imagined to have access to.
Yeah, it's well, we like to try and push it. That's one of the things that drives us, but it's not always easy, and demand's getting higher. There's people coming into the community all the time.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's evolving, shall we say? It's evolving. So
yeah.
chat. I mean, big Star Wars fans, but I'm at home and I've usually got a Cylon behind me right now. So you need to talk to me about them two Cylons.
Oh, these two guys back here.
Hmm.
They're not even supposed to be there. There's a Star Wars show, isn't it? But they're related. They're related in a way to Star
It
Wars. And you know, I came to learn about
was the old
Battlestar
ILM
Galactica.
crew, wasn't it?
What's that?
The old ILM crew, didn't they? Didn't they go from
Yeah, yeah. For
Battlefield?
after A New Hope wrapped up, like they went straight into Battlestar. But the funny thing is, like, you can definitely see the influence. Like, you could probably mix the two worlds up, and you know, if you have no audio and you're not listening to what they're saying, they match pretty closely. Um, uh, I didn't find, I mean, I've always known about Battlestar Galactica, but I never really got into it like after I got into props and all that stuff. But uh but yeah, the silence definitely one of those things. It's such an iconic look, such an iconic design. So I had to get these two for sure.
No, they're great. Them absolutely fantastic. I love all of this era of sci-fi.
And it's sadly something that we don't really get nowadays. I think when you look at movies nowadays, things have gotten really busy in terms of design. When you look at all the designs for new sci-fi movies and like their props, I'm not saying that they look bad, but uh, I think the style back in the day was a lot simpler and there was a lot more imagination involved. Nowadays, I feel like everything's gotten so busy and it's just like it's constantly trying to outdo what was done before, and it's just keeps getting busier and busier and busier. And
I think
there was definitely,
it all starts to look the same, doesn't it?
yeah, it does. It does. You would think that, you know, with more detail, you get more variations, but things start to blend in a lot. It's funny because I was just watching a a video the other day about Transformers and how when you look at the designs of Transformers in the cartoon and how simple they were and how effective they were, and then you look at the movies that came out and how busy all those characters look, and they start to like once they transform into the robots, like they all look the same almost. Like if it wasn't for like the flashy colors to distinguish one from another, there's just so much stuff going on that they start to blend in with each other. And back in the day, like back in the 70s and the 80s, there was that charm of like putting things together with what you had available. Like for me, like the X-Wing helmet, the X-Wing pilot helmets are such a beautiful example of that. Um, because technically it's a real world pilot helmet with just a few other things attached to it and a different paint job. And it worked so beautifully. And then when you wanted to do the TIE pilot, you just attach the Stormtrooper faceplate into it, and that it works. It all worked so beautifully. Um, and you know, you look at the Cylons, their design is not overly complicated. It was very simple, um, yet so effective. And that's something that I think we've lost along the way in movie making.
Well,
Maybe.
I think with A New Hope, especially there's the yin and yang with the good guys. They're still, I mean, they're good guys and bad guys
Yeah.
to me. I'm not having all of this. Oh, well, they're terrorists, and depends on your perspective. There's the good guys and there's the bad guys. And if you look at the helmet on the tie in the X-wing, yeah,
Mhm.
direct comparison. But then also, if you look at the chest boxes they've got, they're kind of made up. They look different, but they're made up with all the same kind of
Yeah.
components
Mhm.
and I think that mirrors in other places as well, like in Hoth, they've got the snowtroopers have got the military mutlooks.
Mhm.
The rebels have got a more civilian, traditional kind of mutluk. But it's a similar, it's a similar kind of thing. And then the fleet trooper helmets and the gunner helmet and the cheese grater helmet, they're they're all related as well.
Yeah.
But you never see it. You never, maybe subconsciously you do, and you accept it. But I don't know. It's just all it's there. There's a real parallel between the two. One's good,
Right.
one's bad, but
I mean,
they're still using the same ideas.
and it kind of happens in the real world. I mean, like if you look at the different militaries, like their 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 gear is similar, and by that logic, it makes sense that in Star Wars, even though we're in a galaxy far, far away, those gears are going to look, like similar, but the colors change, you know? And as we're talking about this, I'm thinking about it, and I think like the whole thing about the design elements being really busy and more complicated as we go on. Like if you look at the prequels, that was one thing that was very evident that, with the use of the computer technology, things started getting really, really busy. And that was actually one of the things that people complain about with like movies like The Phantom Menace, where they just threw everything they had into it. And it's not just the design elements, but just the scenery and all the characters that were involved, and because they had green screen, they just could throw everything they had into it, and it became so like congested, if you want to put it that way. But then when you go to movies like The Force Awakens, I you can definitely see how they tried to tone it back down in terms of the design. If you look at the stormtroopers and all the other um the snowtroopers and the stormtroopers that showed up, you can tell that those designs they tried to keep it simple like they did back in the 70s. They do look a lot more modern, but it's not as complicated as other movies, sci-fi movies that we would see in that time period. You know what I'm saying?
Mm.
Um, that's something that I do appreciate about the new movies, that the designs, they did try to tone it back down. And it feels like Star Wars. To me, it feels more like Star Wars because of that. I mean, they're also using a lot of reference from Ralph McQuarrie, so that also helps. Like if you look at the designs, they were just
Yeah,
recycled Ralph
yeah,
McQuarrie influences everywhere.
yeah.
That helped out a lot.
Maybe a little too much.
Maybe.
Some taste. But okay, before we get down into getting all negative and stuff, I'm not even gonna speak about the sequels because I've been watching the whole thing. So
Oh,
we started in episode one. This is on the big screen at the cinema every week at the moment.
oh,
I'm going, so I've watched all the prequels. I've watched Rogue One, and we've done Return of the Jedi this week. So that's where we're up to. So
oh.
next week it's Force Awakens. I wasn't gonna go, but a few weeks ago, Piero was talking to me, and he kind of talked me into going. So I'm gonna go and try and give him another shot, and then we'll see.
But you did see them upon release, right?
Yes,
Okay, okay.
yeah,
They're good movies. Like I know there's a lot of division um in the community, but they're all good movies. It's just I think what happened is we all had expectations. Everyone had expectations, and sadly a lot of decisions were made that did not meet those expectations. And because of the way life works, now there's a lot of things that we will never, ever get to see on screen ever again that we were hoping to see. And we were hoping to see for many decades. And now it's just not going to happen. That's the unfortunate side of it. But if you take those expectations away and you watch the movies, with like a clean palette, just not expecting anything from it, they're all great movies. I think I think it's just that I don't want to say people are overly critical because I was upset about a lot of the stuff that happened with the sequels um, when they came out. And I had my expectations just like everybody else, and there's a lot of things that I wanted to see. But it's a little unfair, because a lot of people poured their heart and soul into those movies. There's a lot of prop designers, character designers, prop makers, editors, all these artists poured their heart and soul into it. Because as an artist, when you find out that you're going to be working on anything Star Wars related, that's like the highlight of your career, you know no matter what it is that you do, when you find out that you're going to be working on anything Star Wars, that just becomes one of the big highlights of your career. And it is a little unfair, I would say, that because our expectations were not met as far as like the story goes, how do you think all these artists feel that the movie that they were so excited to work on is getting trashed by everybody? Um, yeah, it's like you were talking about the yin and yang. That's how I feel about the new movies. There's like pros and cons. And if you take all your expectations away and you watch them and take them for what it is, they're all great movies. There's a lot of great designs in there. There's a lot of good action. Maybe the story's not what we wanted it to be.
Yeah, I'm staying positive because trying not to. I'm trying to look for the positives and try and avoid the negatives. Um, but I think it goes to show that for all the amazing, like you say, all the amazing work that went into
Mhm.
the sequels, they just didn't seem to hit the spot. So
Yeah.
there needs to be, you can't, even though you had all of that amazing creativity and designs and talent and everything, it's more, it's more than that.
Yeah, I
you
know.
can't just have that. You can't just have the best players in your football team. They've got to be a team and they've all got to gel and they've all got to pull together and they've all got to be wanting the same thing. Um, we'll see because I'm going to go and watch them. But
Well, good luck to you.
you've brought us round. You've brought us round to artists and working for Star Wars projects. So seems like the perfect time to tell us about the comic books and the art that you're doing. I see it all the time on my Facebook feed when you post something up. I see it and I think that's so good. That's really
Well,
cool.
thank you very
I,
much. Thank
I
you very
like that
much.
one. So yeah, tell us more about it because I mean because I know you first and foremost from the prop community and prop
Right.
collecting and very knowledgeable about especially Darth Vader but props in
Mhm.
general. And then the next thing, it's like, wham, I'm working on this Star Wars comic book. And you're like, whoa, that's really cool. So tell
No,
me
yeah.
more about it.
I mean, I've been in the comic book industry for 17 years now, so almost 2 decades. Very fortunate to, be able to make a living doing what I love and sit in the studio all day working on superheroes, painting superheroes all day. That's definitely something that I'm very fortunate to be able to do. And it all goes back to my brother. And my brother was the one that was I mean, growing up in the 80s, comic books was such a big thing, for a kid growing up in the 80s. So my brother always had like a huge comic book collection. And I just remember one of my first like memories as far as me wanting to do comic books. I would go into my brother's comic book collection and I would grab the ones that I would like, even though I was forbidden to go into his comic book collection. I would sneak in there and like grab the ones that I would like. And I started tracing over tracing over the art, which is the thing that always caught my attention. And my brother getting pissed at me because when he found the books, they had like the you could see like the pen marks on top of all the pages. Um, but you know, uh, so I was always into art. And originally, when I started college, I was going for architecture, but that only lasted for 2 years because I realized that I did not like mixing math with art. And, architecture is very much
Hmm.
restricted by the laws of physics and, and math. So I made the decision to go to art school and I moved to Florida, where I was studying animation. And within the school, I started my own like comic book production club because that was the other thing. Like pretty much every college will have their little comic book clubs, but the comic book clubs that we had were all like talking about the new releases and they would like gather to talk about comic books. And I wanted to gather with people that wanted to make comic books. And we're in an art school, like there should be a lot of them, right? So I started my own little comic book production club and we started putting together our own comic books. Um, we then got invited to a few events. Like we were just like offered a table for us to sit at and like show our work, display our work. We weren't even trying to sell anything, we're just a college club. And sure enough, in one of these events, there was a Marvel artist uh, who had he had a booth where he was selling his art and whatnot. And he came over to our booth to see what we had. And when he saw my art, he offered me a job on the spot. So that was like what started the whole thing for me. And I didn't start working for Marvel right away. The reason why this artist was able to offer me a job is because he had his own creator-owned project through another publisher, and he brought me into it. His name was Mario Gully, um, and that's what paved the way for me. That was my big break in, and from there on, like it's never stopped. It's been 17 years of like nonstop comic book art. I didn't get to work on Star Wars right away though. Like the Star Wars stuff started happening much later. I want to say I've been working on Star Wars books for the last, well, I don't know, like 7 years. Um, but before that, I did get to work on other Star Wars projects because I did work on in the animation industry in a company in Florida, and we did some animation for TV commercials for oh my gosh, I always blank out on the name of this video game. The Old Republic back in 2012. So I was able to do some work on the animation for some of those commercials, which were a big thing back in the day. Um, and and yeah, and it's all evolved from there. I was super happy to get to work on anything Star Wars, so that was a big deal for me. Um, I didn't do anything Star Wars for a while between working on the Old Republic and then now the comic books. But yeah, I think I've been doing the Star Wars comic books for at least 7 years now.
Wow, I didn't realize it was that long.
Well, I mean, the thing is like when you're working all the time, social media becomes like secondary. I'm sure you know all about that with RS. Like it's hard unless you have a team dedicated to your social media, it's hard to stay on top of it. And at least for me, because this is something that I do from home, like I'm working almost 24/7. Like I don't get a lot of sleep even to this day. I'm a night owl. So during the day I work on everything that has to do with the house, the kids, the wife. taking care of stuff. And then once everyone goes to sleep, that's when I get into my real like my job, and I don't have any distraction around me, so I'm able to work with my full concentration. Um, but it's hard for me to like if you go to all my social media pages, you'll notice that they are not up to date, and there's a reason for that. It's like I'm way too busy to keep everything updated in my social media. So that's a lot of people like don't find out about me doing this work because of that, because I don't have the time to promote myself. There are times where I tell myself, "Oh, you got to do it. You got to put yourself out there," because I don't have a media team. I don't have a social media team, so it's all on my own. But there are times where I just start posting a lot of it, and you know, people in the props community start finding out that I do this for a living, and they see my connection to Star Wars, and that's always kind of neat, to be able to share with you guys, to share with my friends.
It's really cool. You're gonna need to send me some images over and stuff so we can drop them in and
Now, there's one thing to note, like for Star Wars, like I haven't really done any interior work, any interior stories. For Star Wars, I'm considered more of a cover artist.
Mhm.
So a lot of the stuff I do is just what you see on the cover, and that's like what's been keeping me busy for the last couple of years. But I'm very, very grateful to be doing what I do. It's one thing to work every day with like characters that you grew up reading and loving in comic books, and then when you hear that you're going to be doing Star Wars comic books, um, that's just like the cherry on top. You know what I'm saying? Like I was telling you earlier, like for any artist, when you find out you're going to be working on Star Wars, that's like the highlight of your career.
Mhm. I can imagine. Everybody knows what it is. Straight off.
Yeah, yeah, it's all the iconic characters and designs. It's definitely the most exciting thing to be able to do. You would think for a comic book nerd that it would be Wolverine or Captain America or any of those characters, and they are exciting to work on. But yeah, definitely when you hear, oh, you're going to be doing a Darth Vader cover, it's like, yes, that's my jam.
Right. Okay. Well, it's been really cool to catch up. We should definitely do it again sometime in the not too distant future.
For sure.
And maybe we'll try and have a bit of a dive down into some of the props, maybe into some of the Vader stuff. That would
Oh,
be
for sure.
that would be cool.
That's a topic I can ramble on for days.
But well, thank you for talking to us, and it's been enlightening.
Thank you guys for having me.
Now, it's always good to talk to another Star Wars fan, especially about our favorite subject, Star Wars.
For sure.